Hi, I am Huang, and this is my American journey. Thinking about my past often fills me with nostalgia as I recall everything I have had to overcome to go to where I am today. Like many immigrants before me, I have my share of struggles. However, my goal has always been to honor my teacher and pass on the Tian San Pai Gong system to the future generations, as it was passed on to me. My birth name is Huang. I was born in the countryside of Malaysia in 1948. My father was very strict. He had instilled discipline into me as a child, and the martial art training just enhanced it further. Martial art has always been a big part of my life. When I was 12, I started studying Southern style Kung Fu. I continued until the summer of 1967. When I was 19, it was at that time that I moved to Taiwan for my college education at the National Zhongxing University. In the fall of 1967, I began studying Tian San Pai and Tai Chi Chuan with my Siye, Supreme Master Huang. For those who are not familiar with the term Siye, it's the traditional reference for a teacher of Northern Chinese martial arts. My Siye was a very accomplished teacher who was very strict and didn't talk much. He had immigrated to Taiwan and lost most of his fortune during the Civil War. He taught hand-to-hand combat for the Chiang Kai-shek Special Force before settling down in Taichung, Taiwan. Siye emphasized the importance of self-control and discipline, especially as a martial artist. This helped me maintain focus, integrity, and hard work. The year I spent with my Siye was some of the best years of my life, as I learned the importance of discipline and dedication to Chinese martial arts. I practiced every day of the week. Before my class, I practiced around the basketball arena. After class, I rode my bike to Siye's house for more training. When I first started, I came 3 times a week until I was allowed to participate in free fighting, and then I trained 5 times a week. Often, our training would end late, and I remember waiting with what seemed like hours to heat the charcoal up to take a shower. Still, I enjoyed every minute of training, and it was all worth it. In 1971, I also started studying with Grandmaster Chen Jinbao. Although I will not be focusing on him in these remarks, I want to acknowledge that I learned a great deal from Grandmaster Chen during the 12 years that I studied internal and external martial arts with him. In earlier 1973, I was invited by a Tian San Pai senior classmate to teach Kung Fu in the United States. At that time, I had not met my senior classmate in person, but I knew his brother from our Tian San Pai training together. The only thing I knew about American was what I got from movies and stories. I was in my final months of college, and I have received several professional opportunities in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. When the invitation came, I was intrigued by the possibility of remaining deeply involved with Tian San Pai and experiencing the wonders of the United States firsthand. I trust my senior classmate and accept the offer. I arrived in the United States on April 26, 1973. I was 25 and in a new country with nothing but my bag and the knowledge of Kung Fu. But I was optimistic. I didn't know until later that this was going to be the start of a new chapter in my life. The senior who invited me to America have agreed to pay me $670 per month for my service. When I arrived in Washington, D.C., he told me he could only afford to pay me $50 a week. To give you some reference, that's about $290 in today's value. Just a tap about the current poverty line. I was concerned as I have traveled across the world and didn't know how to survive on only $50 per week. Ultimately, I had to borrow money from my senior classmate and live at his home. It was very uncomfortable, but I had no choice. I never sought government assistance. Instead, I just believed I have to make it work one way or the other. A few months later, my senior classmate opened school in Bethesda, Maryland, and he put me in charge. He suggests that I take up an English name so it will be easier for the students to pronounce and recall. That was the time I adopted the name Richard, a name I have not used since. Although my senior classmate had increased my salary a bit, it was still too low, and I had to live at school. I relied on students' kindness for shower facility before I got a service charge card and purchased my own shower equipment. I can still recall climbing on top of the utility sink to take showers. I used a portion of the carpet floor as my bed and bought a heater to stay warm in the winter. At this time, my daily meal consists of instant noodle and on special occasions, fried chicken. Despite the struggles, I just keep working in hope of making a better life for myself and remain dedicated to promoting Tian San Pai. An opportunity arose in January 1975. With the help of one of my students, David Dalton, I relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio. I was able to open my school, which I call the Tian San Wushu School. To my knowledge, it was the first time anyone would use the Tian San Pai's name in the U.S. Since the school identity and activities were my sole responsibility, I decided to adhere to a more traditional way of teaching. In 1981, I invited Suye to the United States, and he lived in my apartment for a few months with my wife and newborn. Despite juggling 2 jobs and taking care of my wife and newborn at that time, I knew it was my responsibility as a student to take care of my teacher. That includes taking care of all of his expenses like airfare, food, and shopping. Despite my economic situation, I want to make Suye's visit as pleasant as possible, and I was glad to contribute my part to the advancement of Kung Fu. During this time, Suye selected me as his disciple and gave me the Tao's name Chen Liang, which means a person with great capacity. This was a huge honor for me, and it represents my formal recognition as the 64th generation Tian San Pai disciple. Upon Suye's request, I chose some of my students to become my disciples. This was a historic moment, as it was the first group of American students who would become the 65th generation Tian San Pai disciples. I was particularly happy about this because Suye was present, as he supervised the formal disciple ceremony as we pass on the torch of Tian Shan Pai to a new generation in new continent. 1982, when I have saved enough money, I moved back to the East Coast just to focus on teaching Chinese martial arts. I had purchased the school in Towson, Maryland, from my senior classmate's brother. Unfortunately, when I arrived at the school, I was unable to collect tuition from the students. My classmates have already taken the tuition from all the current students for the whole year. I was disappointed and I was strained. Nevertheless, I was determined and find a way to make it work. I found the Tian Shan Pai Association in 1986 to better promote the art and asked Shi Ye about using my disciple's name to promote Tian Shan Pai. He was delighted and he encouraged me to do so. And since then, I have proudly gone by the name he bestowed upon me. Although I started the Tian Shan Pai Association in 1986, I did not have enough experience to do so effectively until 1990s, when I engaged some senior students to help me. The association was eventually renamed the International Tian Shan Pai Association to recognize students from other countries. Shi Ye's final visit to the U.S. was during the International Chinese Wushu Federation World Tournament held in Las Vegas in 1989. He was ill at that time, and despite his positive demeanor, I became worried about his health. Even after he had returned home to Taiwan, the following year, after returning from trip to Germany, where I have taught a seminar, I received a message that something had happened to Shi Ye. I quickly called Shi Liang, Shi Ye's wife, and learned that Shi Ye had passed away. I went to Taiwan shortly after, and Shi Liang and Shi Ye's daughter were kind enough to accompany me to visit Shi Ye's final resting place. As I look back, I realized that during his visit to the United States, Shi Ye was solidifying my position with him and the Tian Shan Pai system. Although Shi Ye was a man of few words, his actions spoke volumes. When I moved back to Maryland, Shi Ye had written me 3 calligraphy pieces in 1985 to hang in front of the school entrance. This calligraphy piece was significant because it represented Shi Ye's confidence in my ability as a martial artist and his support of me as the 63rd generation Tian Shan Pai Grandmaster. I learned a lot about Shi Ye while he lived with my family. I began to appreciate some of his interests outside martial arts. I was even able to help him put on a successful painting show in the United States. Although I never felt like I did enough, I feel honored and humbled when I receive verbal and written praise from my teacher. Along with Tian Shan Pai, I was equally committed to promoting Wushu. Wushu means national art, and it is synonymous with traditional Chinese martial arts. I sponsored my first tournament in 1988 at the Towson Sheraton Hotel. It was an honor to watch martial art practitioners from different parts of the world come together to compete. Today, the annual tournament attracts competitors from almost 30 countries in different parts of the world. We have been honored to receive government recognition since 1990 and have White House representatives attend the event since 1994. In 1991, I was elected President of the United States Chinese Guosu Federation and Vice President of the ICKF. Between 1991 and 2000, I had the privilege of promoting Guosu worldwide. I have received certificates of merit and Guosu medals from multiple ICKF presidents for my contributions. Still, I always felt like I didn't do enough for Chinese martial arts and could do more. Besides promoting Chinese martial arts, I served as the U.S. team head coach on numerous world tournament competitions. I feel privileged to have trained students who went on to win gold medals in world tournament competition in Lei Form, Tai Chi Chuan, Xing Yi Chuan, Ba Gua Zhang, and pushing hands events. I have always thought that it was important to give back to your students and community whenever possible. I am fortunate today to have my students, who are now teachers, training their own students to become world champions in competitions and in life. Moreover, I have sponsored, organized, and participated in many charity events with my students over the years. We have had the privilege of raising tens of thousands of dollars for people all over the country. People ask me, how did I do it? My answer is simple. Throughout my American journey, I have been able to overcome the obstacles in my life through discipline and perseverance. As a student and disciple, I always believed I wasn't doing enough. This led me to do whatever I could to learn as much as I could despite the circumstances. From 1975 to 1986, I would go back to Taiwan whenever I could to train. Until Si Ye's passing, I never stopped learning from him through letters and videotapes I sent to Taiwan to get feedback. When Si Ye visited the United States, I took every opportunity to learn new techniques and receive additional corrections and what I have learned before. This allowed me to learn a lot of detailed and so-called secrets. I gained in-depth knowledge about three major areas of Tian San Pai: fighting, Chin Na, and Nei Gong. More notably, Si Ye taught me most of the Tian San Pai 7-pole techniques, set and write a special poem that details each core principle. The poem enabled me to understand the rest of the set. Only a few individuals in Tian San Pai have mastered a few of the pole techniques, and I am glad to be one of those who know the entire set. In conclusion, I would like to say that it has been an incredible journey, and I am deeply appreciative of the opportunity I have had. Today, I have received recognition from 4 different presidents of the United States for my promotion of Chinese martial arts. It filled me with a sense of gratitude and humility to have contributed to Kung Fu in my little way. Having traveled to over 30 countries to promote and teach martial arts, we now have Tian San Pai practitioners from all over the world. I would like to add that none of this recognition would have been possible without the dedicated support of my disciples and students. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank them for their contributions. I would like you to consider this thought. If a boy who grew up in the countryside of Malaysia can do this, you can achieve even more. With perseverance and hard work, everything is possible. I wish you all good health and happiness. Thank you for listening to my American journey.